Good afternoon. This is Kit Cabello of Hard Lens Media. This is the second day of our coverage of the People Summit here in the city of Chicago. Today, I'm joined with one of the head organizers of Food and Water Watch here in the Midwest, Jessica Fujan. Jessica, thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, essentially, Illinois being a Midwestern state and near the Rust Belt states as well, we're suffering economically, and many people want quick action and quick results. And essentially, right now, we stand on the cusp of having fracking here within our state. Who is doing this, and has it been introduced into the Senate and House of Springfield?
That's a really interesting question. Actually, a few years ago when Food and Water Watch opened its office in Illinois, we were fighting for a moratorium on fracking in our state. Unfortunately, there were some other groups who promoted a regulatory bill and really opened us up, setting up the rules for fracking in Illinois. Prior to the regulatory bill, we had what they call regulatory uncertainty, meaning that a lot of the fracking companies weren't ready to come in and set up operations, unaware of what might happen later on down the road. And so unfortunately, the regulatory bill did pass, and since then, in the very recent past, the first fracking permit has actually been submitted for drilling in southern Illinois near the Shawnee National Forest. We're obviously really upset about this progression of the fracking industry, and we're willing to fight and do whatever it takes to ensure that not one well is drilled in the state of Illinois.
Now, who is in the Senate and House is perhaps fighting on Food and Water Watch's behalf? Is there any allies within the Illinois State Senate and House?
Right now, there is not actually a live bill to discuss the issue of fracking. The legislative session ended just a few weeks ago, and the permit has been introduced since then. So what we're looking at right now is to build a coalition in the state of Illinois around a campaign to ensure that not one well is drilled. So what we're looking forward to in 2018 is putting that bill into motion and hopefully sponsoring some really hard-hitting legislation with our allies in the legislature.
Now, besides fracking, Illinois is also home to the end line of the Dakota Access Pipeline, specifically in Patoka, Illinois. What is your organization's response to that, and have you also petitioned any kind of bills to get that facility shut down?
Right. So at Food and Water Watch, we actually came together with a whole organization, of a coalition, if you will, of groups in Iowa to try to work county by county to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline from being able to be constructed across the way. We find that these fights have to be fought at the local level. Here in Illinois, unfortunately, we do not have home rule authority, meaning it's very difficult to preempt the state and create local laws to stop a pipeline. However, we are submitting comments to an appointed body that regulates pipeline expansion, and we'll be fighting at the local level to do what we can, creating zoning ordinances, and smaller movements that help us prevent pipeline expansion. It will take a lot of time. Unfortunately, the government is not set up in such a way that allows for the kind of democracy we need to see. Luckily, it seems as though we have a lot of bold leadership coming up in the 2018 election. Right now, there are a number of elected officials who have come by our booth to sign a pledge saying that they commit to working toward a 100% renewable energy future by 2035, and they agreed not to allow any further expansion of fossil fuels in Illinois. So if you'd like, we could get together and talk about who those people are at length.
All right, well, we would definitely like to hear more about that. But there's another issue, too, that's affecting specifically the city of Chicago. We all know about the economic and environmental disaster that's happening to the people in Flint, Michigan, and East Chicago, Indiana. But within our city, especially in the south and west side neighborhoods of Chicago, low-income communities and the schools there have to deal with lead contaminant in their water. What's Food and Water Watch's response in regards to the people being affected and being, subjugated to contaminated water?
I think that's a great question, and I think we could actually take it really far back. So here in Illinois, we haven't had a budget in years. The governor, Bruce Rauner, has failed us and has failed a lot of the supportive services that we need to keep Illinois running. I think one huge piece of this is water infrastructure. It costs a lot of money to keep our infrastructure up and running, and a lot of those pipes were laid underground about 100 years ago. Any city would struggle with maintaining that kind of elderly infrastructure. In smaller cities across the state of Illinois, private water companies are trying to capitalize on this budget shortfall by buying utilities, jacking up the water rates, and profiting, bringing in money for their shareholders, while the rest of us are stuck with unaffordable water bills that really threaten the human right to water. At Food and Water Watch, we're pushing federal legislation called the Water Act, which is actually contained in a progressive series of bills on budget considerations right now. We would like to see dedicated federal funding that is brought together by closing corporate tax loopholes. It's time for the rich and powerful corporations of Illinois to pay their fair share to ensure that all Illinoisans and people across the country have the right to water. In Chicago, that's going to be so important because over 800,000 families in the city of Chicago, including my home, are hooked up to lead service pipes, which means that we are, one upset or small disaster away from looking just like so many of the cities, not just Flint, but others across the country that struggle with water contamination. We need to see federal funding that's dedicated to this issue, and here in the state of Illinois, there are a number of bills that have been put forth. I believe that Senator Heather Staines introduced SB 550, which is an attempt to address this lead issue with testing and remediation, but it lacks funding. And so I guess the primary issue is that we have a governor who has failed to bring us a budget to solve these issues. We need people in elected office that will put people and planet first, creating the budget that we need to support our infrastructure. And we need those positions at the municipal level as well to ensure that these huge companies aren't able to take over our water systems in the meantime.
All right, and final question. Yeah. Many states, specifically Hawaii, are now signing an open rebellion against Trump's decision to pull out of the Paris Accord. Hawaii is one of them, as there's a few other states that are standing up as well, with Democrat and Republican governors stepping up to do that job. Unfortunately, there's been some silence from Governor Bruce Rauner and his administration. What is Food and Water Watch's response to that, and has there been a petition or any kind of call for a bill to put something on his desk saying that, yes, we should honor the Paris Accord?
That's a really great question. I believe that you guys were actually with us at the 24-hour event that we threw the day that Trump pulled out of the Paris climate agreements. We gathered nearly 200 people and marched to Governor Rauner's building at the Thompson Center to demand that he stand up not just for the Paris Accords and agree to commit to those standards, but also to go farther. We're going to need a lot more bold leadership and action on this issue if the planet is going to survive. We can't wait until 2050. By then, our members and our friends in Florida will be underwater. You'd think that Trump would be more concerned about Mar-a-Lago. However, I guess he's got a lot on his plate. We are very interested in Governor Rauner taking on the Paris climate agreements, but we need much more decisive action than that, which is why we're asking gubernatorial candidates in Illinois to support a pledge for a 100% renewable energy future.
Quick follow-up. Which of those gubernatorial candidates have said that they would look into and invest into renewable energy resources?
That's a great question. I've only been around today enough to see one, and that's Senator Daniel Biss, a progressive leader in the state of Illinois. He just signed the pledge with us a few hours ago.
Well, that's fantastic news. Jessica, I wish you guys all the best for Food and Water Watch. And Hard Lens Media, we're going to still be covering the People's Summit here. Let's all do what we can to build a better future because the next generation needs it. Peace.
And if we can also, sorry guys.
Go ahead.
If you'd like to join the clean energy revolution, you can do so by texting REVOLUTION to 69866. Again, you can join us in this fight, encouraging our elected officials to take bold action by texting REVOLUTION to 69866.
All right. Peace.